Langley Air Force Base has a long and proud history as the oldest continuously active Air Force base in the world. It started when the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, or NACA, established the need for a joint airfield and proving ground for Army, Navy, and NACA aircraft. The requirements for the site brought them to Hampton, Virginia. They named it Langley Field after Samuel Pierpont Langley, a pioneer in aviation. The years would bring many changes and challenges, the first of which began in the 1920s with Brigadier General Billy Mitchell. His determination to see the Air Service separate from the Army led to the formation of the Air Service School of Application, later known as the Air Corps Tactical School, in 1920. Here, for the first time, aviators began thinking about operational and strategic air power doctrine. While the Air Force wouldn't become its own branch until much later, it was now centralized under an Air Service commander. During the same time, the Navy, desiring a larger blue water fleet, argued that airplanes were useless against naval battleships. Countering that argument, Mitchell led bombing runs from Langley Field on captured German warships and sank the Ostfriesland, proving the worth and capabilities of air power. The victory, however, would be short-lived, as Langley would soon witness the greatest disaster in American aeronautics of the time.
The Italians had purchased the Roma for $194,000. By February of 1922, the Roma was ready to make that first flight. It took off from Langley, it headed south down toward Norfolk, and as it was crossing Willoughby Spit, the front nose of it began to buckle. And they're not sure why that happened, but it caused the steering mechanism to foul, and eventually it just ended up crashing in Norfolk. There was a crew of 45 on board, and 34 were killed.
Throughout the 1930s, Langley Field held an important position in the Army's efforts to strengthen the offense and defense of its air power.
In 1935, the Army Air Service went through a major reorganization by standing up General Headquarters Air Force here at Langley. The idea was to centralize all of its tactical air power in one place.
Langley Field became a major airfield of the United States Army Air Corps, and many of the brick buildings of today were constructed at that time. The 1940s were a thriving time for Langley, and it saw much activity due to the high demand to train troops for the battlefields of North Africa and Europe.
Especially into 1941 and after the war actually started, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, the population of Langley grew to about 8,000, which at the time was a lot. Roughly about 1,000 officers and 7,000 enlisted to do all that training.
The base not only grew in population, but also in size. In March of 1942, Langley Field acquired 582 acres in the northwest area for ordnance storage facilities. With these changes, Langley Field comprised 3,061 acres, almost double the original purchase made in December 1916. The end of World War II brought a major realignment to the United States Army Air Forces, including the formation of 3 major commands, one of which was Tactical Air Command. Although Headquarters TAC was activated in Tampa, Florida, in March of 1946, it moved to Langley Field just 2 months later. Finally, on January 13, 1948, the newly created Department of the Air Force took control of Langley Field and changed its name to Langley Air Force Base, as it's known today, a part of Joint Base Langley-Eustis. Langley took to space in 1958 when NACA became NASA and the Space Task Group was established. They appointed an aeronautical selection committee which drafted the first astronaut selection procedure and picked the original 7, all of whom were then stationed at Langley Air Force Base. The 60s brought thousands of Air Force families from all over to Hampton as they waited for their loved ones to return home from the war in Vietnam. It was a high-casualty war that caused families to accumulate over time in Hampton. Eventually, they became a part of the community and formed a strong connection to the area. In 1975, Headquarters Air Force brought the first fighter wing to Langley Air Force Base as it made plans to station the first operational F-15 wing. jump to January 9, 1976, where the 1st Tactical Fighter Wing receives its first F-15 Eagle.
In the middle of 1975, when Air Force decided that it was going to put its first operational F-15 unit here at Langley, the wing leadership here decided to have a contest on what should the name be for that first F-15 to come to Langley. And two students, Terry Ewell, a 9th grader, and Kyle Shockley, a 7th grader, both came up with the same name, the Peninsula Patriot. So when the first F-15 landed here at Langley on 9 January 1976, both students were here to put that stencil on the side of that first F-15.
In 1985, Memorial Park is dedicated to the airmen who lost their lives in the 3 conflicts since the founding of the Air Force.
The F-86 Sabre fought in the Korean War, the F-105 Thunder Chief in the Vietnam War, and the F-15 Eagle in the Cold War. In 1991, an F-16 Fighting Falcon was added to honor the airmen of Operation Desert Storm. In 1992, the inactivation of Tactical Air Command took place due to Air Force-wide restructuring.
The idea was to combine the assets from Strategic Air Command and Tactical Air Command into one new command, which became Air Combat Command.
The 2000s saw Langley Air Force Base move further to the leading edge of the Air Force. 30 years after being the first operational F-15 base, Langley became the first operational F-22 base, with Lieutenant Colonel James Hecker landing the first Fighter Wing's first F-22 Raptor. Like with the F-15 in 1975, the F-22 became, bar none, the most capable fighter aircraft in the world. As part of the Air Force's Total Force Initiative, the Virginia Air National Guard's 192nd Fighter Wing moved from Richmond, pairing active duty and National Guard members side by side at the forefront of the latest aircraft designs. In 2003, the 480th Intelligence Wing, which started as an anti-submarine group in the 40s, came to Langley Air Force Base, bedding down the Air Force's distributed common ground system. Redesignated the 480th Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance Wing, it provides second-to-none intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance support through its 6 subordinate groups located worldwide. Its sister wing, the 363rd ISRW, began as the Air Combat Command and then Air Force Targeting Center, provides the Air Force's premier precision targeting production, Special Operations ISR, and full-spectrum analytical support to the tactical warfighter. Finally, Langley joined forces with Fort Eustis to become a joint base in 2010, and the 633rd Air Base Wing, originally constituted in 1966 Vietnam and once the host unit on Guam, was reactivated to oversee daily installation support operations.
Langley Air Force Base was integral to the founding of the Air Force, has participated in every war since its founding, and is leading the way in air superiority. What we've witnessed within the last 100 years is staggering. Imagine what we'll accomplish within the next 100.
I'm not going to get below 300 knots, but back towards you, dude, I can't tell, some small, very small black object. I had it at 17.7. It just flew right over me.
Confirm the object appears stationary.